I'm Evelyn Grant. I'm 32 years old. And this is the moment my own father pushed me into a fountain in front of 200 wedding guests, laughing like it was some kind of joke. The icy water clung to every thread of my emerald silk dress. My heels scraped the slippery marble bottom of the hotel courtyard fountain as I struggled to stand, mascara streaking down my face. Somewhere in the crowd, a guest actually whistled. Someone else yelled, "Guess the reception has a wet t-shirt contest now." But I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just smiled faintly. Not because I was okay, not because I wasn't humiliated, but because I knew something they didn't. They had no idea who I really was, who I had married, what I had built. The laughter? It was just the last sound they'd make before everything changed. The ballroom shimmered behind me in candlelight and crystal. From the outside, it looked like perfection. Orchids draped from every chandelier, gilded cutlery on white linen tables, a Vera Wang wedding gown sweeping across the floor. But underneath that shine was the same old story. I wasn't welcome. Table 19. Not the family table. Not even close. Just far enough away that I might as well have been part of the hotel staff. That's what they did. They cut me out of photos, out of conversations, out of their carefully polished version of family. But this time, they didn't stop at subtle digs. This time, they went for blood. "You came alone?" My cousin Victoria had asked, raising a perfect brow. I nodded. "Yes." "How brave," she said, with that sweet as poison smile. "After what happened with that professor you dated. What was his name again? The one who dumped you for a student?" I never dated a professor. Never got dumped. But that was the Campbell family's special tire riding history to keep me small. The whispers followed me like perfume. "Is that dress off the clearance rack? She must be working some boring admin job again. Why is she even here?" My mother had greeted me with a glassy kiss on the cheek and a whispered insult. "That color washes you out. You should have asked me before choosing something so bold." And my sister, Allison darling Allison, glowing bride too, hadn't even looked at me during the ceremony. I wasn't a sister to her, I was a shadow. The reception surged forward without me. They took family photos while I was parking my car. The maid of honor toasted, the sister I never had, conveniently forgetting I existed. When I tried to join a circle of cousins on the dance floor, they casually shifted away, like I didn't belong in their orbit. I stood by the wall, watching, smiling, waiting for him. Nathan. My husband. My secret. Because while they told stories about my failures, they had no clue I'd married one of the most powerful men in the tech world. That I was the youngest deputy director in FBI counterintelligence history. That I held more clearance than anyone in that room had the IQ to understand. I wasn't here to prove anything. But when my father clinked his champagne glass and toasted my sister as the pride of the Grant name, I started walking toward the terrace, just needing air. And that's when he stopped me. In front of the entire room. "Leaving already, Evelyn?" My father boomed, mic still in hand. I turned slowly. "Just stepping out for some air." "Running away again, huh?" He sneered. The ballroom went quiet. He kept talking. 32 years old, no husband, no prospects, no real career. And still showing up, acting like you belong. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. I swallowed. "Dad," I said softly, "please stop. This isn't the time or place." "Oh no," he said. "It's exactly the time and place." And then with that smirk he always wore when he was right shoved me. Hard. The last thing I saw before hitting the water was my mother sipping her champagne. And smiling. I stood up, drenched, makeup ruined, silk clinging to my skin. The fountain water was cold but not as cold as their laughter. My father looked triumphant. My sister looked entertained. The photographer clicked away, immortalizing my lowest moment. But what they didn't realize was this. I wasn't drowning. I was transforming. Like steel pulled from fire. I stared at my father and spoke with a voice steadier than I expected. "Remember this moment. I said. He blinked. Remember what you did today. Remember how you treated your daughter. Because I will. And then, drenched but dignified, I stepped out of the fountain, water dripping across the marble floor. They think I'm weak. They think I'm alone. But they're about to find out who Evelyn Grant really is. Because someone very important is about to walk through that door. And nothing will ever be the same again. They didn't always laugh at me. Once, a long time ago, I think they might have loved me. Or at least pretended to. I grew up in Beacon Hill, Boston, where brownstone facades hide broken things behind elegant windows. In the Grant family, everything was about presentation. We were the kind of family that sent holiday cards 2 months early just to be the first ones on the fridge. But even as a child, I knew something was off. My parents, Richard and Diane Grant, were society people. My father was a senior partner at a white shoe law firm, and my mother sat on a dozen charity boards. They knew how to perform affection for an audience. But at home, it was different. Especially when it came to me. From the moment my younger sister Allison was born, the rules changed. She was soft and golden and smiled on cue. I was the quiet one. The serious one. The one who asked too many questions and never fit the mold. "Why can't you be more like Allison?" became the background music of my childhood. At age 6, when I built a solar-powered Lego car and presented it at the science fair, my father barely looked up. That same weekend, Allison wore a tutu in a recital and forgot half her moves, but she got flowers and applause anyway. I learned quickly. Brilliance was invisible if it wasn't beautiful. By 12, I was a ghost in my own home. At family dinners, my comments were ignored or corrected mid-sentence. At 14, when I was accepted into a regional STEM camp, my mother said, "That's nice," and then changed the subject to Allison's new dance shoes. The worst came on my 16th birthday. I still remember the white linen tablecloth, the steak my dad grilled, and the way I sat up straighter than usual, waiting for some moment of recognition. Instead, my father stood to toast. "We're so proud of Allison. She's just been accepted into the Young Artists program at Juilliard." Everyone clapped. No one remembered why we were gathered in the first place. The cake stayed in the fridge until the next day. Untouched. By college, I knew the game. I enrolled at Boston University because Harvard was too ambitious, and community college was too embarrassing. Bull was their safe compromise. I worked part-time while carrying a full load in criminal justice, often falling asleep on my textbooks. I graduated with honors 4.0 GPA, departmental award, volunteer work. But when I called home to share the news, my mother sighed. "At least you chose something practical." Allison, on the other hand, is following her passion. Her passion, by the way, was modern dance, funded entirely by my parents. The final break didn't come all at once. It happened in 1,000 quiet moments of erasure. One winter, when I invited them to a panel I was leading at a local law enforcement conference, they RSVP'd yes, and never showed. One spring, when I won a departmental award and brought it home to show them, my mother handed it back and said, "You should really consider whitening your teeth for public speaking." But the real fracture happened the year I was accepted into the FBI Academy. I remember standing in the kitchen with the acceptance letter, expecting maybe for once some pride. "You're going to be what?" my father said flatly. "A federal agent," I replied. "Counterintelligence." He scoffed. "You'll never make it through the training. That's not a woman's job. That's a man's job, or at least a reckless woman without a plan." He poured his scotch and walked out. My mother didn't even ask where Quantico was. That's when I stopped telling them things. No more updates. No more invitations. No more holding space for people who wouldn't show up. At first, it felt like betrayal, like cutting off oxygen. But then, strangely, it felt like breathing for the first time. I moved into a cheap apartment across the Charles River, built a routine of early workouts and late-night case reading. I trained like my life depended on it because it did. FBI Academy was grueling, but I thrived. I was disciplined, observant, sharp. And best of all, no one there called me Allison's sister. The last time I attended a family event before the wedding was 3 years ago, me mother's 60th birthday gala. I wore a sleek navy dress, heels that hurt, and a forced smile. Allison arrived an hour late in a gold gown, and the spotlight never left her. My father gave a toast. He spoke about legacy, about appearances, about the grant name. He mentioned Allison's recent performance at Lincoln Center. He didn't mention me at all. When I got home that night, I took the photo from the event off my mantle. And never looked back. They thought they'd silenced me. That I'd slipped quietly into some invisible, mediocre life. What they didn't know was that while they erased me, I was rewriting my own story. Far from their world of curated perfection, I was becoming something else entirely. So when that wedding invitation arrived 6 months before Allison's big day, I hesitated. My instinct was to toss it. But something inside me whispered, not yet. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking for closure. I just wanted to see for myself how it felt to walk into that room knowing exactly who I was. And knowing they didn't have a clue. When you grow up being invisible, you learn to stop performing. You stop waiting for applause. You stop announcing your milestones like they matter. You just get to work. At Quantico, I trained harder than I ever had in my life. While other candidates collapsed after 10-hour drills, I stayed behind to run solo laps. While others reviewed coursework, I memorized counter-surveillance protocols until 3 a.m., then woke at 5 for firearms training. There were days I couldn't feel my legs. Nights I cried in the shower, letting the steam mask the tears. But I never gave up. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval, I was chasing excellence. I graduated top of my class and entered the FBI as a junior analyst in counterintelligence. Not glamorous, not high profile. Mostly paperwork and endless hours of watching security footage or decoding chatter. But I loved it. Because beneath the noise of politics and posturing, I saw the patterns, the threats, the cracks in the system. And slowly, they started seeing me too. Within 3 years, I was leading my own field team. By 29, I was promoted to Assistant Director of Counterintelligence Operations, youngest in Bureau history. My security clearance was so high I couldn't even confirm my job title to most people. Not that I had anyone to tell. My parents didn't know. My sister didn't ask. And I had long stopped offering. For a long time, it was just me and the work. No birthdays, no holidays, no family dinners. Just encrypted files, adrenaline, and long nights on stakeout with a thermos of bad coffee. I convinced myself I was fine with that. That needing people was a weakness. That vulnerability was something to be edited out of my life, like a typo. But all of that changed the day I met Nathan Reed. It was at a cybersecurity conference in D.C. I was there as a panelist representing the Bureau, under heavy alias and cover, of course. Nathan was the keynote speaker, founder of Reed Tech, billionaire tech prodigy. I knew his face from business articles and intelligence briefings. His company secured communications for both Fortune 500s and classified government systems. We weren't supposed to speak. But I caught him in the hallway outside the VIP lounge, standing alone, staring at a broken espresso machine like it had personally insulted him. "Needs a reboot," I said, walking past. He glanced up. "You speak fluent machine?" "I speak fluent failure. That thing's been blinking all day." He laughed. Not a forced, performative chuckle but the real kind. From the chest. "I'm Nathan," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm Claire," I replied. "My cover name." He nodded like he knew it wasn't my real name but didn't push. Instead, he asked, "You ever get the sense you're the only adult in a room full of very expensive children?" "All the time." We had coffee, then dinner, then late-night walks along the Potomac. I kept waiting for him to turn into someone else. To ask too many questions. To get bored. To try to own or fix me. But he never did. He saw me. Not the performance. Not the file. not the shadow behind someone else's spotlight. Me. "You're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met," he said once, as we stood on a rooftop watching planes slice across the dark. "No one's ever told me that before," I replied. "Then they've all been fools." We dated quietly, carefully, through the chaos of our lives. Me, managing operations with national security at stake. Him, navigating global contracts, IPOs, and attempted data breaches from every corner of the world. But in the in-between moments in kitchens at midnight, in quiet hotels, on back roads in cities no one could pronounce, we found peace. We married 18 months later in a private ceremony. Just 4 people, me, Nathan, his sister, and my closest colleague from the bureau. There was no veil, no orchestra, no cake. Just a quiet promise. I will love you as you are, not as the world expects you to be. We never announced it publicly. Not because we were hiding, but because protecting something sacred sometimes means keeping it off display. Especially when your family would dissect it like a headline. For 3 years, we lived 2 lives. One in the opener respective roles, our public identities. And one in the quietured breakfasts, crossword puzzles, morning workouts, long nights debriefing each other over a glass of wine. Nathan respected my need for distance from my family. He never pushed. He just asked one question once. "Do they know who you are?" "No," I answered. "And they don't want to." So when that wedding invitation arrived from Allison, with gold calligraphy and an RSVP card too ornate to be real, he let me decide. "I can fly back in time," he said. "Or I can stay out of it." "I don't need saving," I replied. "But I might need reminding." "Reminding of what?" "That I'm not the girl they still think I am." He kissed my forehead and whispered, "They have no idea." He was supposed to be in Tokyo on the day of the wedding, finalizing a security partnership with the Japanese government. "I'll try to make the reception," he promised. I told him not to worry. Just one afternoon, I thought. Just smile, survive, and leave. But I should have known better. In my family, survival is never that simple. The Fairmont ballroom glittered like something out of a royal fantasy: gold leaf ceilings, crystal chandeliers, live string quartet. It was exactly the kind of excess my parents lived for. I arrived right on time, in a fitted emerald gown and classic updo. Simple. Elegant. Respectable. The valet took my Audi without comment. The usher found my name with a brief frown and motioned toward the far end of the hall. Table 19. Not the family table. Of course not. I passed relatives who barely looked up. The few who did offered compliments dipped in acid. Came alone again? My cousin Victoria asked, her smile so tight it could slice glass. I nodded. I did. How independent, she replied. Each conversation echoed the same theme, condescension disguised as concern. You still working that government admin job? Heard your last boyfriend left you for someone younger. Hope you at least brought a decent gift. I smiled politely, responded calmly. Let them believe what they wanted. Let them choke on their own assumptions. Because today, finally, I didn't need their version of the story. The maid of honor, Tiffany, delivered a speech so pointed it was practically a blade. Allison was always like the sister I never had, she gushed, ignoring my very real presence 2 tables away. Always radiant, always accomplished. The best man added, Bradford's lucky to join such an exceptional family. When the applause ended, I sipped my water slowly, checked my phone. Text from Nathan. Landing soon. ETA 45 minutes. Perimeter team already in position. A flicker of calm pulsed through me. Just hold on a little longer. Then my father stood up at the mic. And everything changed. Today, he said, raising his champagne, is the proudest day of my life. My heart thudded. I didn't expect recognition. I just hoped not to be collateral damage. To my beautiful daughter Allison, he continued, who has never disappointed us. From her first steps to her graduation to her marriage today, she is a testament to what the Grant name stands for. I inhaled deeply. Okay. Expected. But then his eyes found me, still holding the mic. Not everyone in our family has lived up to those standards, he added, casually. The air thinned. She couldn't even find a date, 32 and still alone. Working some mystery government job. No prospects. No accomplishments worth mentioning. The room shifted. People turned toward me. Laughing, murmuring. Some smiling with discomfort, others delighted by the drama. I'm sorry if my attendance offends you, I said calmly, rising. Oh no, he replied. It's your lack of substance that offends me. Then he crossed the floor. The mic still in his hand. You've always been jealous of Allison. Always hiding. Always disappointing. He was 10 feet from me now. The room was frozen. Even the quartet had stopped. You don't belong here, he sneered. And then he shoved me. Hard. The courtyard fountain was colder than I expected. Gasps. Laughter. A whistle from some drunk cousin. A phone raised to take pictures. I stood up, soaked. But not broken. Not this time. I looked up at him at all of them and something inside me snapped into place. Not in anger. In clarity. Remember this moment. I said, voice even. All of you. They went silent. Remember what it looks like when someone you discarded stops needing your approval. And I walked drenched, proud, eyes locked forward out of the fountain and through the ballroom doors. 20 minutes later, I stood outside near the valet. My emergency dress was in the car, a simple black sheath and flats. I changed in a side restroom, reapplied basic makeup, and returned, clean, calm, and ready. Text from Nathan. In position. Entry in 90 seconds. I stepped back into the reception hall just as the cake was being cut. My mother's voice floated above the din. Evelyn's always been difficult. Same parents, same chances. But Allison made something of herself. Her friends nodded, murmured sympathy. Some people just refused to thrive. I stepped beside her, dry, composed. You done? She startled. Her smile froze. Oh, you're back. Always keep a spare outfit handy. I said smoothly. It's a professional habit. She blinked. And then the ballroom doors slammed open. 2 men in sleek suits stepped in. Their posture? Military. Eyes scanning with precision. A hush fell. My father approached them, puffing up his chest. This is a private event. Perimeter secure, one said into his earpiece. Proceeding. And then Nathan walked in. 6'2". Tom Ford suit, wind-tousled hair, shoulders back like he owned the world. Because he did. Behind him, more security fanned out along the edges of the room. But it was his eyes I noticed first zeroed in on me, softening instantly when they met mine. He crossed the room like it was empty. And then, before hundreds of people who had spent decades doubting me, he took my hands. Sorry, I'm late, he said. You're right on time. He kissed me gently, privately, and turned to face my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Grant, he said with perfect composure. I'm Nathan Reed, Evelyn's husband. My mother's mouth dropped. My father laughed, actually laughed. Sure you are. Nice stunt. Who did you hire an actor? Nathan's smile never faltered. I'm the CEO of Reed Tech. The room gasped. Phones lit up. Whispers exploded. Wait, isn't that the guy on Forbes? Did she say husband? My father went pale. That's impossible, he murmured. Nathan's tone shifted subtly but firmly. Impossible or inconvenient to your narrative? He glanced around. None of you know who Evelyn really is, do you? More doors opened. And in walked 2 familiar figures in bureau attire. Marcus. Sophia. My most trusted team. Director Grant, Sophia said clearly, handing me a tablet. We need authorization. The silence was suffocating. Director? Someone whispered. Of what? She's with the FBI? Nathan answered, coolly. She's the youngest deputy director of counterintelligence in US history. Her decisions save lives every day. And you tried to humiliate her for not having a date? I tapped the tablet. Proceed with surveillance. I'll debrief in 20. Sophia nodded. Yes, ma'am. The guests? Stunned. Silent. Ashamed. Even my mother seemed to shrink back into her chair. And me? I turned to face them one last time. Congratulations, Allison, I said calmly. Bradford seems decent. I wish you well. Then I took Nathan's hand and walked out past stunned relatives, collapsed lies, and years of silence. No tears. No rage. Just truth. And the long overdue sound of respect. The whispers followed us all the way out of the ballroom. Behind us, crystal chandeliers, shattered illusions, and 50 stunned faces struggling to rewrite a narrative they'd spent decades controlling. In front of us, the rooftop helipad. The sleek black helicopter already humming, its blade slicing through the Boston night. Nathan's hand found mine as we climbed the stairs. I looked back once and saw my mother standing there at the top of the grand staircase. Not angry. Not proud. Just unsure. Evelyn, she called out, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. You can't just leave like this, we need to talk. I turned. Calm. In control. There's a national security situation developing. I replied. I don't have time to process your regret right now. She blinked. You really are who they say you are. I nodded. For a long time now. She swallowed. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I said softly. And if I had told you, would you have believed it? She didn't answer. That was the answer. The embassy crisis turned out to be real but manageable. Encrypted chatter. A potential leak. We neutralized it within hours. By midnight, I was home. Home where Nathan had made my favorite tea, laid out fresh clothes, and queued up our favorite old sitcom for background noise. He pulled me into his arms as we stood by the window overlooking the Charles River. Still breathing? He asked, pressing his forehead to mine. Barely, I whispered. But I think something in me broke today. Maybe, he said gently. Or maybe something finally healed. The next morning, the fallout began. My phone lit up with messages from people who hadn't texted me in years. Cousins suddenly checking in. Allison's best friend begging for brunch. An email from my father titled "Let's Talk" that read like a poorly disguised legal brief. Even Allison sent a single message from her honeymoon. We need to talk when I get back. I ignored them all. Until one name popped up that made me pause. Emma. Bradford's step-cousin. She'd offered me a dry dress and walked me to the valet after the fountain incident. No agenda. Just kindness. Her text read, OMG. The family is in meltdown. Your dad keeps repeating director like it's a foreign word. Your mom is weirdly quiet. Allison hasn't come out of the bridal suite. Also, I googled your husband. Holy crap. Want to grab coffee sometime? You have a new cousin now, whether you like it or not. I laughed out loud. For the first time in days, it felt good. Over the next few weeks, I ignored most of the calls. Not to punish them, but because I finally understood something I'd spent my whole life missing. You don't owe access to people who refuse to respect you. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting go of the need for their version of you to matter. Still, therapy helped. So did coffee with Emma. And long walks with Nathan, who never once pressured me to reconnect or cut ties. He just stood beside me, quietly reminding me I didn't have to do anything to be enough. One night, as we cooked dinner together, I told him, I think I can have some kind of relationship with my parents. But only if it's on my terms. No more pretending, no more shrinking. Nathan nodded, handing me a glass of wine. That sounds like strength, not distance. So I called them. My mother picked up. Sunday dinner, I said. Nathan and I will come, but before we tether our ground rules. There was a pause. Then, I'm listening. That dinner was awkward. Predictably so. My father tried too hard, swinging between defensiveness and fake warmth. My mother offered too many explanations for each dish, like she was auditioning for approval. Allison arrived late. Bradford greeted us sincerely. Allison? She barely met my eyes. But after dinner, she asked to speak alone in the garden we used to play in as kids. I didn't know, she said. Number, you never asked. I think. I liked being the favorite, she confessed, her voice shaking. It was easier than questioning things. I nodded. That doesn't make it right. I know. Bradford says I need to talk to someone. About why I felt threatened by you. Even before I knew who you really were. Her honesty surprised me. I'd consider therapy, she continued. Together. If you're open to it. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. The months that followed were complicated. Some dinners ended in silence. Others ended in real laughter. There were steps forward and backward. But the difference now? I had boundaries. And they knew it. 1 year after that infamous wedding, Nathan and I hosted a gathering at our home. Not just family. But chosen family. Friends. Bureau colleagues. Nathan's sister. Emma and her boyfriend. Even a few relatives who had shown genuine interest, not because of headlines, but because they finally saw me. As I moved through the house, topping off drinks and passing appetizers, I heard laughter. Not cruel. Not pointed. Just real. Warm. Whole. I stood in the kitchen, watching my father show Marcus photos of a fishing trip. My mother was smiling at Emma's dog videos. Allison? Laughing at something Bradford had said, her shoulders finally relaxed. Nathan came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. You happy? He whispered. I leaned back into him. Yes. And not because they finally see me, but because I don't need them to anymore. If you're watching this and you've ever felt erased by your own family, if you've been labeled the failure, the disappointment, the one who never quite measured up, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Other times, it's setting boundaries and letting them try again on your terms. Either way, you deserve to be seen for who you actually are. So tell me, have you ever been underestimated, only to quietly rise above it all? Share your story in the comments. Because someone out there needs to know they're not alone.